Now, as we continue to grapple with the causes, effects, and solutions to gender-based violence, the conversation surrounding the preventative measures also arise. Many people believe that one of the ways to curb these instances of violence is teaching children about it at the school level and including it as part of the school curriculum. And with me to talk more about this is the Spotlight Initiative National Champion and partner with the law firm MG Daly & Partners, Mrs. Sharon Clarke-Rowley. Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Kimberly, and thank you for inviting me to the show this morning.
Of course, I must say it really is a pleasure to have you here, and I'm excited to jump into this conversation.
Indeed.
Now, you've been selected by the UN representative as one of the nation's Spotlight champions. First of all, what is the Spotlight Initiative?
Well, the Spotlight Initiative is a global partnership between the European Union and the United Nations, whereby their object is to eliminate gender-based violence against women and girls specifically by 2030. 2030 being one of the UN's goals to attain sustainable development throughout the world. And with that in mind, one of those goals is gender-based equality. So if we are able to get rid of domestic violence, gender-based violence, we are on the road to achieving those goals.
Now, as a national champion, I mean, what do you believe we can use to actually achieve that, to eliminate gender-based violence?
Okay, firstly, I see myself in the capacity as champion as a voice for the voiceless, because there are so many women and girls who suffer daily at the hands of violent men, and they are unable to speak out. So if we can get persons to speak out on their behalf, to champion the cause, then again we're on the right path. I see those persons, as being your sister's keeper, and that in itself is important. We need to be there for our sisters, and our projects need to be applicable to that goal.
Great. Now, you recently hosted discussions among our nation's young people at an event held by the NGO ICANN, and of course there was also the United Nations Population Fund. It was entitled GBV and Me. How successful was this event?
You know, it was a resounding success. And in that regard, we had young people both from Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean diaspora. And what we did, it was hybrid. So we had those who came from Trinidad and Tobago in-house, so to speak, at the residence of the Prime Minister in Tobago. And then we had those who were virtually with us, so right up the Caribbean. And the contributions were really mind-boggling. So at the end of the day, we were able to get insights into GBV, and also there were solutions which were offered by the participants and the panel, which consisted of young people.
Now, Mrs. Rowley, can you share some of those solutions, at least two, that would have been discussed?
Okay. One of them would have been, and I'll go directly because you raised this, to bring in education about more education on GBV. And in that regard, I thought that it would be a good thing to introduce it in some way into the school curriculum. And in doing so, one wonders, okay, at what level do we bring that into the curriculum? And I remember some years ago, because when I was involved with the personal development program at Bishop Anstey High School, we had attempted to get a social worker to come and speak to the young people, the young students, so they are therefore in high school. And she said she didn't have the time because she needed to be in the primary schools. So therefore, when we're looking at teaching about gender-based violence, making students more aware of it, I think we need to go into the primary school and probably start at standards 4 and 5, where children are more aware of what is going on. Though when we read the stories, we realize that from the age of 2, you have children who are totally familiar personally with GBV. So my suggestion was that, so that was one of them. And of course another suggestion, which was raised by the young people, being young people, is that you promote the elimination of gender-based violence by social media. And of course, you know, that's their thing. You have Twitter, you have Instagram, and whatever other forms of social media that you can use to relay the whole issue on GBV.
Nice. Now, when you're talking primary school, is it going to be primary school and secondary school, or are they going to get that teaching from that stage to carry them onwards?
Okay, now you remember that this is my thought.
No, of course,
right?
Yes, yes.
So that I would think that we go from primary school into secondary school. So we deal with it at both levels. Those who have missed it at primary school, you deal with it at secondary school.
Now, how will creating awareness in young children help?
You know, there is the proverb in which says, train up a child in the way in which he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. So once we train young children, young people about gender-based violence, about the ills of GBV, about all that can happen with regard to GBV, domestic violence, then when they are older, they will understand that this is not something that we must practice. You must learn about love. You must know that there mustn't be domestic abuse. You must learn that you must show respect. And we have to teach our boys and our girls about respect for each other, respect for themselves. And once we do this and teach them it's all about love. So once we do this, we know that our young people will be on the correct path, and we will be on the way to attaining that goal of gender equality, because that's what it's all about. This is what it's all about. So by 2030, we know that we will not have eliminated gender-based violence or gender inequality, but we know that we're on the road to achieving that. And with that mindset, we continue along that road to whenever we reach that goal.
Now, Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, the conversation coming out of the GBV and Me seminar that you had recently, of course, this was your opinion that maybe we should start teaching, you know, gender-based violence in primary schools. But I'm just wondering about the parents who may be concerned that I'm sending my children to school for education, for academic curriculum, rather than that sort of social issue. I mean, how do we respond to that?
Firstly, as parents, I mean, they are entitled to, I would say, control the lives of their children. And in many cases, some are not able to do that. And therefore, if you're not able to do that, we want to deal with other channels, one of them being the schools. And if we are going to the schools, we go through the normal procedure, I would think. You have consent forms. So you send the consent forms home. Are you prepared to allow your child to be part of these discussions? It's all part of personal development. So if your program may not be entitled GBV, but as part of a personal development scheme within the school, then these could be introduced. So you have your consent forms, you bring in your PTA, because the PTA is supposed to be essential in the school environment. So once we do that, I think that we have covered it. Of course, if a parent doesn't wish to have his or her child join the conversation on the days when it is introduced, then she or he is free to say, look, my child will sit out this session.
Okay. And given that you've introduced the concept, what are some of the topics you anticipate might be addressed in school?
Okay, I think that it's going to be wide-based. So you deal with respect for each other, love for each other, and then you go into the subject matter. Children experience, street harassment, which really is a form of gender-based violence, whether you call it catcalling and think it's simpler, but it is the start. You have domestic abuse. You deal with bullying, again another form. We deal with cyber safety. So you choose the areas which will be and can be addressed using the input of all these young people, because you know the UN actually had a hashtag, nothing for us without us. So we bring the young people in, which was what the whole GBV and Me project was about. We got the information, we got the opinions of all these young people, as I say, from Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the Caribbean. And you're not going to ignore them. You're going to put this down on paper and take it further. As I say, take it further, you can introduce the same program in churches, in the communities.
That was my next question, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. So my next question, of course, is now that we have a model to follow with the school system,
right,
are we going to use, the churches, the youth groups, that kind of thing?
Most definitely.
Right.
Because school is there, but you have those who are in the churches.
Yes.
And you use our religious leaders, faith-based persons, to deal with that. And in fact, ICANN proposes to have future events, such as the one we had, the GBV and Me with the Young People, dealing with men. And because, and as I say, men, this cannot be achieved, equality cannot be achieved without the input of men. So we have to bring, if we as women are to realize our full potential, then we have to have the men, because they are the ones who need to understand women. They need to understand our minds, and they need to understand and tell us in their discussions why this happens, how they see it could be stopped effectively, and we move forward on that basis.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned one of the topics to be discussed will be cyberbullying, because I feel everybody is online now. Has this been an increasing problem? Knowing that you're a gender-based violence advocate, have you seen this to be an increasing problem with girls online?
It is reported that it is. And it will be once we all have, these young people have phones, once they have computers, once they have access. So to this information, you will find that this happens. We have seen cases in the United States where young women have killed themselves, committed suicide because of the effects of bullying. So that online. So that, again, because of the state of social media nowadays, this is something which has to be addressed.
Of course. Now, Mrs. Rowley, I know that you're an advocate for women and girls, but also looking at gender-based violence in a broader spectrum and including the men. Do you think we as women as well could do more to ensure the protection of them as well?
Of course, I think it is quid pro quo, so that you deal, I mean, they're helping us, we have to help them. And in the Caribbean case, even in Trinidad and Tobago, you find that you have had in the past and continue to have social norms where the man is regarded, the boy is regarded as the boy, mommy's boy. And while you will find that in some cases, the mothers are very lenient with their sons. And I feel that, as you said, and I think when I was listening before, they were talking about QRC having something in place to deal with gender-based violence.
Well, yes,
right,
yes.
So that is important. You go right there with the boys and you get their thoughts, you get their ideas, because there are those who are totally against GBV and will support the cause. And in fact, the other national champion is Mohammed Muakil from Freetown Collection. And I think he was an excellent choice. And I expect to be hearing more about him and the way he addresses the issues with the young men on GBV.
Nice. And I mean, coming out of the Spotlight Initiative, Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, what else can we expect from the campaign?
Well, as I say, I am working with ICANN. And in that regard, ICANN uses drama and the creative arts to deal with vulnerable youth. And with the same GVV aspect in mind, this is why I said they are going to have, I'm told that they will be having other projects dealing with men, young men, and older men, and faith-based leaders dealing with the whole issue of GBV.
Now, Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, as a gender-based violence advocate, are there any other organizations or any other people you partner with just to get the message about awareness across?
So far, not really, but it is my intention, because there are a number of groups that I align myself with. One is the Down Syndrome Network, and persons with disabilities actually can be victims of domestic violence, where men take advantage of young women. So if one can introduce that as a topic into the discussions with these young people. Similarly, I associate myself with NTOTO, which again is a non-governmental association which assists and develops young people. Again, that is an avenue to bring it in. So at every opportunity I have, I intend to treat with the issue in order to make myself relevant as champion.
I like how you said that. Make yourself relevant as champion.
Yes, definitely.
Nice. I mean, Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, thank you so much for joining us. Before we close, though, any final thoughts about this issue, about anything that's happening right now that you want to address?
Basically, since I link GBV to what we are seeing in the media, and last week I think we had reached a point where persons could have considered that women's violence against women was becoming a national crisis. When you open the papers and you see 3 women killed in 3 days, and the next day you see a 4th woman has been killed, you know that it is serious, and you know that action has to be taken. Coming out of that event on Saturday, the minister and the Ministry of the Prime Minister, Ayanna Webster-Roy, spoke very comprehensively about what all that the ministry was doing, and I was quite surprised at the full extent. They covered legislation, they covered socioeconomic policies, they covered children, they were covering GBV, the legislation, Domestic Violence Act, Sexual Offences Act. All that is being done. So while we sit back, we may not be hearing fully about it, but I'm sure at some point in time they will bring it to the fore, because we need to know what is being done, what avenues are open to persons who are victims and persons who are survivors of GBV. And I say to everyone, all women and men, be champions of the cause.
Mrs. Clarke-Rowley, thank you so much for coming in and just sharing this interesting topic. Who knows, maybe we can see it in a few years, but we'll have to wait and see.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course.
Okay.
And that was Mrs. Sharon Clarke-Rowley, who of course is the Spotlight Initiative National Champion. And of coming out of a conversation recently, we heard that there might be, there's an opinion to teach gender-based violence in schools. According to Mrs. Sharon Clarke-Rowley, we may want to see it maybe at the primary school level first and take it from there. So you're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Stay with us.